The HX Collective explores the human experience through three main channels of life: work, relationships, and self. With raw, authentic conversations, the podcast investigates how challenges can become powerful teachers, leading to personal growth and deeper connections. Rooted in humanity-centered design, each episode reflects a commitment to doing good and doing well, featuring diverse voices and generational perspectives. Expect gripping stories of struggle and success, with thought-provoking discussions and concrete tools and tactics that encourage you to rethink your relationship with distress, helping you to establish your full human experience. This is the HX Collective channel. Hello, friends, and welcome to the next episode of the HX Collective podcast. I am always so excited when people who matter so much to me get to come into the orbit of our HX Collective listeners. And today is going to be such a great conversation. And in fact, it's a conversation that's been 10 years in the making. It's my great privilege to introduce you to my friend, Kevin Wood. And Kevin is not only coming to us as one of the most sought after thought leaders in healthcare law. He resides in Austin, Texas, and he's coming to you today not only with the wealth of wisdom in what he does professionally. He is a man of great conviction as a leader in his family, as a husband, as a father, and as I recently learned, a grandfather. And let me tell you, grandbabies need to be baby models. Seriously, so cute. He's also a tremendous investor in his community. Faith is a cornerstone in his life. And today we're going to have a great conversation about what it means to create culture in the space of human flourishing. And so first of all, welcome my friend Kevin. Happy anniversary too, friend. It's 10 years. I went back and did some math and when did we become co-collaborators in the conversation of culture? It's been a decade, over a decade. So happy anniversary.
Well, happy anniversary. That's a nice surprise to learn today.
Isn't that fun? And the other thing is, we're going to include your bio and a number of things that you're going to talk about today in the show notes. But I did want us to start and, have you introduce yourself a little bit more about your background. I think we should also acknowledge in the best ways possible, a lawyer who cares deeply about culture. Those are not always the things that go together in the same sentence. So I think it would be important for us to take a step back so that you can share a little bit more of the context of kind of who you are in your work, and then how that intersects with our primary conversation in human flourishing today regarding culture. So tell us a little bit about you, my friend.
Well, thanks, Deb. And thank you so much for the chance to be with you today. I'm so excited. It is always great to have a chance to talk with you, see you, and reconnect. It's hard to believe that it's been 10 years. So many times it seems like yesterday. So many times it seems like we've known each other for 30. So it's exciting to be together today. And thank you for letting me have a chance to kind of tell a little about myself. As you mentioned, my name is Kevin Wood. I live in Austin, Texas, and I am a partner with the law firm of Nichols, Weissner, and Thomas. But I want to come to that last. I want to start a little bit about how I see myself and what are the important things to me. You've already mentioned one of those. And right now, the most important thing in my life has to be our granddaughter, Hadley. She is a joy. It is so much fun. You think, as parents, you have a great time. You fall in love with that baby when he or she arrives. But when it's a grandbaby, it's just a next level of love. And so that is such an important part of our piece of life today, and getting to see her. The good thing is she only lives about 45 minutes away, so we get to see her a lot, which is lovely. But because I have a grandchild, that obviously means I'm also a father. And I have a daughter who is 29, who is an artist. And fun fact, she just got accepted to a master's program in England and will be starting that next fall. So we've got some exciting things there. And then her younger brother is 28. They are very close in age. He obviously is now a father. But those two pieces of life were so important to me and were such a factor in my professional role as a lawyer. I couldn't divorce those, and it was important that whatever choice I made as the lawyer was that those had to be factored in. And then finally, because of those two, I am married to my wife, Vicki. We have been best friends for over 35 years. This year, we celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary. And so, yeah, we are totally parts of each other's others' lives. And so that is how much, that's the piece of me that most people don't see when they're talking to me as the lawyer, because they see the lawyer side. But those components flow in to that relationship and what I bring to the table for clients. You mentioned my faith, such an important part of me. I have generations of faith that brought me up, and that is such an important piece of our lives that we've passed on to our children. I hope those pass on to Hadley and other grandchildren. But that piece of it is what now informs my role as a partner with a health law boutique. So I've only been doing this with NWT is way easier to say than Nichols, Weitzner, Thomas. So that's probably, I'll use that going forward. But NWT, I've only been with them about almost 8 months. It is a new adventure. There are only 11 of us. So I have gone from firms that range in size from 200 to 300 to 600 lawyers down to 11. And so it's been an amazing change. And it really is the result of the conversation about culture and what's important in the choices you make. So I love it. And we all focus on health law. So instead of having to deal with kind of the politics of a larger firm and somebody who does real estate law or labor and employment law or corporate M&A, we all do healthcare, and we all focus on that industry. So it's an important piece of that.
Kevin, I absolutely love your introduction, and I love that our audience is getting to know you for the first time today, and to know that you are a whole person, and that the things that matter so deeply to you, that there's no piece or part of your life that isn't fully connected with purpose and on purpose. And as somebody, as you know, that I love lawyers, and I've made the better part of my professional life has been teaching lawyers how to be more lovable. I recognize for those that work outside of the legal industry, they don't always see the word lovable and lawyer in the same sentence, and are maybe a bit more prone to look at the side of the punchline to a good lawyer joke as how they would absolutely connect. And if we don't do anything else today, I want to give everybody the sweet experience of seeing what it means to be in a profession, and in your case, such an important aspect of the law and health law, which touches all of our lives in some form or fashion, but to do it in a way that's always focused on the human experience and human flourishing. And so there's so much to be said and so much to be engaged based on the journey you've shared so far. Now, let's talk about the conversation of culture. There's an adage that often says, culture eats strategy for lunch or breakfast, depending on what meal the respective speaker is pointing to. But the point is that culture really is the cornerstone. And absent having a clarity of culture and what it means to cultivate culture, any strategy or tactic that an organization would make has a much less likely opportunity to be successful or to be sustainable if it doesn't have the right container. So for context purposes, how would you define what it means to focus on culture, specifically in a law firm setting?
Wow, what a great question. And so many pieces of that could be touched on. But I think what always comes to mind when we talk about culture and we talk about you and I, individuals, the important thing I try to keep in mind is we are all human beings. And that to me is the cornerstone of culture, is remembering, how does the organization look at its individuals in the human context, meaning what value do they bring? And sometimes it may be an organization that's a secondary value or a tertiary value. I mean, that's coming down in the bottom. The important thing is the productivity or the cogs you're making today. We have to make 10% more of those cogs and produce them and get them out to the customer. But it all comes back to that human component. And if you'll let me, I'd like to share a story. I was thinking about this as we came to it today, and why is culture so important to me? And it really goes back to when I was in law school. I was blessed to, I came to Austin to go to law school. So that's where I was living. I had no thought process. The timing was related to our children, and getting out of law school was when our oldest was going to go to school. And I wanted to be where we were, so that when law school was over, even though we may not in our forever home, wherever that was, I wanted it to be not a disruption to school life. And so that was the timing of law school. I was blessed to find a great pair of mentors. They happened to be a married couple who were pioneers in health law back in the 1980s and 1990s. They brought that from its infancy as a practice area and grew it. And I found a job and found a place here in Austin. So Austin became home. But during law school, my father-in-law had emergency surgery and was diagnosed with colon cancer. And it was during my second year of law school, so midway through, almost exactly halfway through when this happened. My the partners and mentors that I worked with, I was working, I had a clerkship. They told me to do whatever I needed to do for that piece of my life. I was going to school. I had this job. I had the family. And they gave me the space to make a priority of what was happening in that part of my life. Fast forward, that was about halfway through my second year. He goes through some treatments. He seems to be better. And then January of my 3L year, so just a few months before graduating, the cancer returns and it has metastasized and it's spreading. And it is 3 months of pretty aggressive growth. And it is clear that time is not on his side.
Yes.
And so right after I graduated, he made it an important piece. He came to graduation as sick as he was. But my wife made the choice that for the last whatever period of time that was, she was going to go live with her mother and help take care of her father. So we made that choice that she and the kids were going to go. The partners understood that. And I already had my job offer, so I already knew where I was going to be. And so Vicky and the kids went. And then I'm getting ready. I have bar exam prep. I have all these things. And I come into the office one day because they knew dollars were important. It was important to have money. So they knew that I needed to work while I was still preparing for the bar exam. And so this is happening. I'm in a different mind space. And I come into work one day and they say, hey, we need to talk to you. We've talked to the firm. And so we just need to have a few minutes to chat with you. And of course, in that period of life, you think, oh no, something's wrong. It's going to be a horrible, my life's about to change. It's already bad. Now the firm's decided something different because it's XYZ. And they sat me down and I said, okay, give me the bad news. And they gave me kind of a weird look. They said, we don't have bad news. We're coming here to tell you, we know where you are. We know what's happening. We know Vicky and the kids have gone. You're here by yourself and you're going to be starting your bar prep. And I took a different approach. Instead of doing a bar prep course, I took a self-study piece. And so it was going to have to be, and I did it because I needed to work. I couldn't just go spend 6 weeks in a bar prep course, 8 hours a day. I needed something different. And they said, we know you've taken this choice to do a self-study program. We've talked to the firm and we have about 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And we want you to know that your job for that next 6 to 7 weeks is to prepare for the bar. And what we mean by that is you will come, and I haven't practiced this, so I'm going to try not to get emotional, but that means you're on the clock from 8 to 5 with your lunch hours, blah, blah, blah. That means you come in, you go to your desk, and from 8 to 5 for the next 7 weeks, you study for the bar. You use that stealth study course, and we are going to cover your job for that. You log in, you clock your hours, and you don't worry about it. You just study for the bar because that's the important piece that comes in your life.
Wow.
I was floored in that not only I wasn't floored by these two individuals who made this gesture. They were dear to me already and kind of had already laid a foundation of there's some things that are more important than the job.
Yeah.
But was more important to me and more amazing is they had gone to the law firm and had the conversation of how important I was to their practice, how important it was that I passed the bar. And they convinced the firm to invest in me by still paying me to do a job, but not do the law clerk work that was there. And it taught me a lesson that there are more important things and that the hourly rate is important, the hourly work is important, the client work is important, but there are sometimes we have to invest in a different piece of the individual and allow flourishing to come later. It's an investment that they were confident the return on that investment was going to be however many fold because they invested at that moment. And that made such an impression on me that is why it became important to me as I looked as a young associate, as I grew into a young partner, a more senior partner, of this is how you invest in people, and this is how you make culture an important part of what you do in a law firm.
Yeah. What a
And
powerful story.
and think about that. A law firm said, this is more important. I mean, yes, it was these two individual partners who went to bat for me, but it was this law firm that agreed and let them.
Wow. So first of all, two things, and I'm feeling emotional for you. I think the recognition of culture is deeply human, and the priority that comes with that, and this idea that we have whole human beings, in our workplace. And the first thing that comes to mind is, having known you for 10 years, I am recognizing that in all of our work, I've never paused to ask you the origin. And I think it's so critical. So, as a side note, if there are people in your life that you feel deeply connected to or you feel deeply aligned with regarding values and things like culture, I'm reminded that I wish I would have asked you that question 10 years ago, because there is something so like sense making for me now. Because as I hear you describe this, now this makes sense to me as to why this isn't just a passing. I was a lawyer who was trying to be like more like an MBA, that there was an element of living this out and paying it forward in every aspect of the work. It makes so much sense to us. And so as we unpack this idea of leadership and culture, and I'm eager to hear, some of the practical things that you've been able to do in moving culture to be a priority in a law firm strategy. I also just want to say living it. And that's what I'm getting from you right now, is that these people made such an impression and made such an investment in your life that it has changed your life and has shifted your entire point of view in what could otherwise be very much about profits per partner.
Absolutely.
And that shift and being in a space where culture is at the cornerstone of your work and the priority of your work it makes so much sense. So thank you for that. Let's talk about practicalities. And, when you think about, first of all, if I found you the entire time I've known you, you are insatiably curious and you are a continuous learner. And when you think about some of the wisdom that you've gleaned along the way, either through lived experience or things that you've studied, what do you think are some of the more important considerations as we look at the interplay between culture and leadership? How do those things fit together from your vantage point?
So another great question, and so many thoughts that come to mind. The first thing, though, and it's going to sound very cliche, but I think the first piece of this for leadership and culture is you have to be authentic in it. And what I mean to that is, be true to whatever your organization is. So I've been a part of really now 4 firms, but one it's really 5, because one of those firms after many years became part of another firm. And I see a distinction in those, because they, at the end of the day, they were very different. And what I saw in that is sometimes the struggles in the situations, or the sometimes the over focus on the human experience, or being kind to individuals because that's the firm way that you thought of, had a detriment to the profits per partner or to the productivity, because we lost the side of accountability. But that was because we weren't being authentic to what that human piece of it really meant. We thought it meant being human and being compassionate, and what it really meant is having compassion with accountability, and we lost the accountability piece. So what I learned from that, and that is really, it's the authentic nature and being honest about what is the important thing to your organization. Yeah. That firm shifted a little bit when it became some part of a larger organization. And that shift went over to more of the productivity. Working hours became much more important. What your effective rate per hour was much more important. And what I learned is there was not quite super honesty toward that piece of the puzzle either. They wanted to say they were the culture side and the human experience side, but it was really more about the dollars. And you can have both.
Yeah.
And so what I learned in that is being honest about what that is and using that authenticity and that honesty to build your strengths. Because at the end of the day, not only is it about authenticity, it's also about choices.
Yeah.
And we can find out if productivity, profits per partner, having a higher level of compensation is what's the most important thing in your life, then you need to be at a certain type of firm.
Yeah.
If building and investing in people and understanding that compensation may not be as high, but you have a deeper relationship with your coworkers and who you work with, that's fine too. You just know that you're giving up that choice. And that's one of the things that I learned from this. So I chose firms that were not, and you talked about lawyers and the lawyer jokes and how we don't necessarily seem lovable. Well, those are absolutely true. There are law firms out there that they expect associates to bill 2,400 hours. Well, I'll tell you, as a corporate lawyer in the healthcare piece, but I'm more transactional. I don't do litigation. It's hard to get 2,400 hours a year. And when you don't have litigation or you don't have depositions, they're just an 8-hour block that fall in your lap. And so it's you can have that. But I knew that I didn't want that because I had, as I mentioned, my 2 children who it was going to be important to me. I grew up with a professional father who devoted everything to the profession. And so I was not really, this is not good, bad, or indifferent. It's just an honest piece of it. I love him very much. He loves me very much. But he focused on that piece. And so through my growing up years, he was not at events. He was not at my games or I was a big band nerd. So he wasn't at my band concerts. And it was very important to me that whatever I did, that to the extent it was possible, I would do that with my children. And so I made choices to pick places where I wouldn't necessarily have to, you still have to work hard, you still have to bill, you still have to collect, you still have to make money, but I didn't have to necessarily do it in a way that meant I only saw them when they were asleep versus waking hours.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that I'm taking from what you're describing. And, sometimes I do think culture ends up in the be nice category and that we don't see it as a business imperative. And your point is so well taken in that, culture really is the sum of, your core values in action. And what I'm appreciating is that if you have a core value of compassion, that isn't to the disconnection of accountability. We also have a core value of having a profitable enterprise, an enterprise that has stability, that has the ability to employ people. I mean, so sometimes we can see where culture gets lumped in with soft skills or niceties and loses sight of the fact that no, there is the counterbalance of accountability. I'm also appreciating, though, as you talk about the distinctions of cultures, and I'm appreciating that you're not villainizing necessarily a culture that places a high value on productive hours and profits and putting that may very well be the right fit alignment for someone who has a very strong sense of that fits with what I want most of my life. And yet when you have the courage to know thyself and then to choose, and in the case of, choosing to be in environments where the trade-off is compensation, but the benefit, it's almost like you're getting paid in a different currency. And I think it's important for people to understand that knowing your core values is where this starts. And that's what I'm perceiving, Kevin, is that strong sense of clarity, born perhaps out of your own experience with your own childhood experience and becoming a parent and what's important. Like knowing your core values first is critical when you're going to be able to assess fit when it comes to culture. And then the second thing is, when you're cultivating a culture, I'm hearing it needs to be done on purpose, with purpose, and a sense of accountability. And if we have a wider sense of how we get paid, comp is only one piece of that bigger picture.
I think that's so important. Sorry,
say more, please.
Yeah, as you were talking about, there's no reason we all as a society kind of look at lawyers and think, oh, all we see are those commercials on TV, which is a different type of law than I do, yeah, you're a lawyer. That means you've been divorced 3 or 4 times. Your life is different for XYZ reasons. Your kids don't know you, or you don't know your kids. And that's not true at all. I know lawyers who are at those very high level profit per partner firms that also love their families, and they make different choices of how they interact with that. But it's important not to villainize it. It's important to find that core value and know where you fit and how it should fit you when you look at those organizations. The other thing that, as you talked, and the reason I popped in is sometimes not that you change, but sometimes what's important to you and the core value component of what you value of that rebalances. Yeah. So that when you're the young single associate, it's no problem to be with that firm where you're billing a lot and making a lot of money, and you're worried about your law school debt. And so you use that to change that. And then 5 or 6 or 7, however many years later, you find a significant other. Your life changes because you now have somebody else in your life, whether that means you then have kids or pets or something else. But that means, oh, that is now, I have to find something that fits that. Yeah. And that doesn't make the first thing bad. It just means that it's different or doesn't fit anymore. And so you've got to recognize kind of that know thyself, and to thine own self be true, but also realize, this is not the right fit anymore, and don't feel bad about it. I think we also put too much stock on how does society view this? Yeah. How do my friends view this? How may I went to law school, and now I'm going to go take a big pay cut to go do this because it helps me be paid differently. Yeah. And I had not thought about it in that context, but I love how you talk about that and how you can use that to talk about it. No, I still am getting a great deal of compensation. It's just I'm giving up some that's monetary to build relationship or to enhance my joy. And I know that's also cliche or kind of that touchy-feely piece of it. But this life is finite. Yeah. Now, I have a strong faith that much more is eternal, but this piece of what we do is numbered. Yeah. There's an end to it. And it's all too short to be doing something that is not in balance with who you are as an individual and what you need in your life at the time. Yeah. And so if it changes, and that's how I see culture. Like organizations, we want to think about corporate America and, you start when you're 22, you work for 45 years, 40 something years till you're 65 and you retire. One, that's not the world anymore. Yeah. And I don't know that it was really ever a law firm, the legal world anyway, because things just change and law firms go in and out. Mm-hmm. And consolidation has changed so much of that. But you also have to think, where does this fit with my life now? And when you're starting to see struggles, that's a kind of another practical piece of this. When you're not wanting to be where you are, when it's hard to go in, when it's difficult to meet client deadlines, look back, take a step back, and maybe that means this culture is not what now fits your piece and your component of where you are, and where do you need to go from that? Yeah. And we should keep that in mind, both as the individual, but as the organization. When we are trying to hold someone accountable, use that in a way to say, this may be why you're having an issue with our vision of accountability. And step in and be the human being of, how can we help you find your right place for that accountability? That doesn't mean you're giving up something or hurting your organization just because you happen to have and realize you're taking that moment and realizing you may need something different now as the leader to the mentee or to the worker of this may not be what's the fit now, and be compassionate in how you do that. That doesn't mean, that means this isn't the fit, so tomorrow you have to be somewhere else. It's how do we help you find that peace? Because at the end of the day, you don't know what that person goes off and does and brings back, says, think about what they did for me. And we sense on, oh, that it's not the perfect fit for where we are, but your client need is perfect for where I was. And this is who you should call.
Yeah.
And
So
it's
powerful.
and you shouldn't be thinking about, oh, what I'm going to get in return, but it should be mindful of, you never know where someone's going to be, and how you helping in that moment can also help you later on.
Yeah, so true. You're pointing to a couple of interesting trends. One trend is that law firms are starting to recognize that, once you've established the expectations and the accountability, instead of, again, looking at human beings as, interchangeable or, like commodities of themselves, that powerful compassion and consideration may then require you to look at cultural fit based on where the person is, what they require, and then figuring out it's not just flip the switch, but off ramping or offboarding is becoming increasingly more of a priority, because to your point, you've invested. In fact, I've got one law firm client that says their culture is decidedly, as they were talking to groups of lawyers, particularly when they're young and associates, they'll say things like, you are sitting among people right now that you need to recognize and remember they either are going to be your future partner or they're going to be your future client. Treat them as such. And that is a powerful cultural norm. And that really is the norm. And this particular firm lives up to it, that if a person is no longer a fit relative to the standard of the law firm's expectations of performance and the person's desire or ability to meet it, there's an off-ramping to say, how do we get you to a space, whether it's becoming a client or get you to another law firm platform where it can be a good fit. So I really appreciate what you're describing, and you're describing it again in the way where compassion doesn't mean soft. It also can mean clarity. It can also mean accountability. As I transition, being in a law firm, but I'd say really being in a professional services firm, anyone who may be listening today that works in an environment where people are the product, where the billable work or the client service is the mechanism for revenue, I'd argue that there are no better people in the world around human flourishing and human experience than lawyers or leaders of billable professionals. Like, you are in the best possible position to elevate the human experience, because that's the product you're working with, right? The ingenuity and the innovation is in the human experience. So why do you think then, if we agree that lawyers can be among the most strong influences and contributors to human experience for other lawyers, or consultants and other consultants, or accountants and other accountants, why do you think lawyers and professionals, why do they get stuck, do you think, in the people part of their roles?
It's a great question. I would come at it a different way. To me, the problem is that people don't get, I think from a law firm and a legal industry standpoint, and this probably comes, it's a little different so I work all day. My other professional, given the industry that I work with a lot, is doctors. Well, they always see the human component because that's who they are dealing with.
Yeah.
Whereas as a lawyer, even though I am dealing with humans as the client, what I see, especially if it's an organization, I had to keep in mind, it's a group made up of people. But I come at it the other way from the legal piece of it, and the legal industry piece of it is, the problem to me arises when they don't get stuck in the people piece.
When they don't get stuck.
When they don't get stuck in the people piece, they get stuck in the partner productivity piece, the profit per partner piece, the economic metrics of the organization becomes the sole focus, and you lose sight of the people piece.
Yeah.
And something that sticks with that, when you mentioned about being the compassion and the accountability, to me, sometimes it's important to keep the people piece in mind while you're looking at the objective pieces, because sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to say, this is not a right fit for you.
Yeah.
And that is not a judgment on the individual, other than our firm expects these things.
Yeah.
I can see you as a human being are never going to flourish doing these things.
Yeah.
So we need to, that's a piece I have to focus on those things. But for you, I'm focusing on how can we help you find that piece to it. So to me, what happens is the leaders get to focus on the non-human, the non-people aspect of it. To me, and it goes, I think you can go the other way. I think sometimes you can, and this is quite frankly what happened to one of the firms I was in. They were too focused on the people piece. And it was to the detriment of the objective pieces.
Yeah.
So it's a balance, and you can see it, but we should always keep in mind the human element, and how can we help that human element be its best piece.
Yeah.
And that's where I think if you fall into that mindset and you have the lawyer and the leader who are looking at it from that piece, you can get stuck in the people piece of it for that, because you're looking at it to balance it.
Yeah, it's a great. I like the redirect a lot, because again, well, first of all, I mean, well done, counselor. You say you're not a litigator, but that was a pretty good redirect. Made the jury note. I do appreciate though that it can be more problematic when the human aspect of the work isn't registering, to your point. And then I also think it's really important. So for those of you who are listening, and I do know a number of people listening are in the legal industry based on my community. And I will say, hear what Kevin said. Hear it very clearly. Compassion, the most compassionate thing you could do is actually help a person leave. And I do see that some of the culture is conflict resistant on the human side, or they're not able, to get stuck in the people is to get stuck in the people, and allowing individuals to flounder and to, not be the best that they can be, and thinking that you're doing the right thing by just letting that linger. I think there is an edge, if you will, to, being human and being compassionate is also being incredibly clear about, what is expected. And I think that combination is really key. And I do appreciate that. Well, I would love, Kevin, with the remaining time that we have today in our conversation, is to maybe for you to share some of the practical things that you're doing or have done over the course of your career that you think, other lawyers could consider. So if I'm listening and I want to be someone who is invested in building a culture that really elevates human flourishing, what are some practical things that you do in the course of a day or a week or a month or a quarter? Like what are ways that we can behave as a leader that cares about human flourishing? Any examples you can share?
Sure. So for me, and this I'll share a little bit too, because this builds from lessons I learned from the business development side of being in the legal industry, because we all want the envelope. We all want the template of how it works. And we do, various firms have done business development pieces. The most practical thing I think of it though is finding what works for you. So I can give you tools and I can tell you kind of what I do and kind of some practical pieces to it. But don't think about the rainmaker who always goes to a Chamber of Commerce event and schmoozes the room, and that's how he then tells everybody that's what we should all do. Or I call my clients every day at 5:30 or at 8 in the morning, and all of those things sound horrible to you. It's finding what works for you. So one thing that really works for me is being intentional of either the project or the communication. And what I mean by that is whatever tool you use to organize your day, use that tool in a way that you are purposeful of putting a reminder on your calendar of whatever the thing is. Oh, I was talking to so-and-so 3 weeks ago, and they mentioned they were looking at a new venture, or they were looking at, put the reminder on your calendar to follow up. And I have to do that because so many things now happen. Quite frankly, if it doesn't fall onto my calendar, it's not going to happen. Whether that's a meeting or whether that's a client event or any of those. So that's be purposeful and use the tool, your organizational tool, for that.
Yes.
this is going to sound cliche because it's the mantra of we have two ears and one mouth, so listen twice as much as you speak. But it's to me, it's the other thing that I've tried to do in a practical way as I built a team, as I looked at what do we do to create a healthcare team that works well together and works with each other, is take time, again, be purposeful, sit with somebody. And even if you have 15 minutes, sit with them and say, hey, I just want to hear how things are going. Maybe you ask two questions and then let the rest of the 15 minutes be directed at you so that you can listen and process how that person's life, for lack of a better word, is impacting what you're trying to build. And that goes back to all these other conversations of that practical piece of taking the time. And you have to be mindful because you have projects, you have client issues. So maybe that means you just know every week that you have about 30 minutes or an hour, however your days work, that you do that. So then you're mindful of where you're placing that on your calendar and who you're placing on your calendar to talk with. And then finally, and I am the world's worst at this, but it's the follow-up. And it's being practical again and being mindful with the follow-up. And what you'll learn is you'll see the people where they, not just as the associate or as the junior partner or your office neighbor, you will start to see them as the human being that they are and understand how those pieces of their life, whatever it is, the significant other, no significant other, an organization that they take all their non-billable time to support, and how that comes into play with the team and the culture you're trying to build. And what will happen over time when you take kind of these small practical steps that I found, and this is what it all flows together, and you learn to make a team that works together.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, these practical pieces, it goes back to me of what's the important thing. Relationships are the important thing. Just even getting a client. You can't just go out and talk to an individual and they're going to hire you tomorrow. It may take 3 weeks. It may take 3 months. It may take 3 years, depending on where they are in their lives, where they have vendor relationships or professional consultant relationships. But it's the same way on the culture side.
Yeah.
Use those practical steps to over time learn about the human being that you're talking to and building however that relationship is.
Yeah.
It sounds a lot of and kumbaya and it's all going to be happy. It's not, because there are going to be some individuals that no matter how hard you try, you just don't mesh with.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that either. You just have to learn, okay, this is not a positive piece for our relationship, but these are positive pieces. So let's build on the positive pieces and figure out how we kind of wall off the less than positive pieces to help the culture.
Yeah.
But to me, that's really the practical steps of using the tools and being mindful of what this is.
So it's interesting. I normally, when I wrap up a podcast, I ask my guests to give us a 3x30 call to action, 3 practical things we can do in the next 30 days, but you just gave them to us. So I'm going to summarize to make sure I didn't miss it. So the first thing is in listening and using your ears and mouth proportionately so that you have the ability to stay intentional. And I do love that using a calendar is a very practical thing, that if somebody says to you, I'm going to be looking at this new venture, or somebody says I'm having surgery in 3 weeks, or if somebody says I'm going to Turks and Caicos to celebrate a milestone anniversary, taking the time as a leader to calendar a follow-up on that can be so impactful, but it's because you're listening to what the human being is willing to share and then capturing that in a way. And there is so much power then when we talk about step number 3, which is in the follow-up. It's like you save yourself from yourself because you're building a discipline to be purposefully thoughtful, which a lot of people think thoughtfulness has to be spontaneous. I'll say that's like suggesting that, it's easy to date your spouse. Like you got to be intentional. Yeah. Date nights don't just spontaneously erupt, being planful. So having that listening, recording, and then being time boxed and time sensitive in the follow-up, those 2 things working together are 2 of the 3 great actions I heard you say. The third action, though, was the one in the middle. And I love this idea of like scheduling the no agenda meeting where there is that carve out to just be with humans in the space of them being human. I would say not only does that work in building the culture with your team, it's also a great thing to do with clients. The power of
Right.
saying, we may be in the
Absolutely.
midst of a big transaction, there's a lot going on. I want to carve out 10 minutes to say, like, how are you actually doing? Like, we're coming upon the year end. Like, how's the year going? How's it shaping up? What do you have to get done between now and the end of the year? Sometimes those no agenda, no productivity kind of dialogues can be everything when it comes to cementing relationships. And ultimately, the human experience doesn't occur in isolation. It happens in the context of relations. So how do we do? I think we got the 3x30, didn't we?
I think we did.
Awesome. So my final question for you is, as you think about 10 years from now and you're projecting out and say, it turns out culture, lawyers, law firms, it turns out to be the very best you could ever hope or imagine. What would it look like if it was better or different than what it is today?
So this is going to be, I've been thinking about this question and I appreciate you kind of helping guide the discussion before we have the discussion. And this comes into play, not with what we've talked about, but kind of comes into play with respect to where we are as a society. And I mean that I've listened to some of the podcasts. I listen to a lot of other podcasts, and we're kind of in a very divisive culture right now. And to me, I've seen that bleed over into the organizations that we work with and the firms. I with NWT, I am blessed that we're such a small group that we don't really have that. But that's kind of the model of what I would like to see in 10 years, is that we listen to each other more and understand when sometimes I may disagree with you, but that doesn't make you a bad person or the enemy or wrong because you don't agree with me. Let's talk about it and talk to each other in a way that we can understand that and still be friends, still be coworkers, still be productive members of our organization or our people group, whatever that may be. But that we can still respect each other because of the values we have, the beliefs we have, where we may be. That's where I want to see ourselves in 10 years, that we have moved back. And some of that is how we used to be. I think it's also not as much how we used to be. We just don't want to think about how it really was kind of divisive, 50, 100 years ago.
Sure.
But let's listen to each other so that just because we're on opposite sides of whatever issue it may be, doesn't make us enemies of each other.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I can say with confidence, first of all, your continuous learner and curiosity are showing in that aspiration for 10 years from now. And I'm glad that you highlighted that while there is often a hearkening to get back to something, I would say your final point is, what if we created something that is rooted in a level of honor, a level of compassion and care, a level of curiosity and not judgment, and doing it in a way where human beings can elevate and flourish, even in the space of disagreement and even in the space of having a differences, if you will, around our experiences and point of view. So thank you for this great conversation. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so excited for what's going on with you and NWT. Give my best to your colleagues, and I can't wait for us to pick up a next conversation. Be well, my friend. Bye now.
Be well. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. If today's conversation sparked something in you, we hope you'll carry it forward with curiosity, compassion, and courage. Subscribe to the show, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs it. Until next time, keep exploring what it means to be fully human.